spoiled.
And then they just give me the receipt and I'd pay.
The guy walks in one day and then he says that he wants to make a movie.
He was blowing the money.
There was just like this habit that he had where as soon as he got money, it was gone.
I just didn't have the skills or the experience.
This money, I could see it disappear so fast.
Catch exclusive interviews every weekday for candid, exciting, and thought-provoking conversations with your host, Erika Ndoro.
We talk about arts, we can talk about sports, we can even talk about politics, and sometimes we venture into a nice guitaristic play. The one story where you can't get out of your head.
Wakatarisa munhu so Erika like where you're sitting. Ndozongokona bata face so pasina munhu.
Wakasiya music yako iyo afro chakuti ndo music manje yemuZimbabwe.
And I'm sure they're still saying the same thing now.
Yeah, so
Shona kana kuti chindevere kana mumwe mutauri muno muZimbabwe ndiwe iwewe ndiwo rupawo rwako ndicho chidadiso chako.
Catch me, Erika Ndoro, right here on ZTN Prime every single Monday at 7 p.m. whilst we get exclusive.
Captain Wally J is about to take you to boot camp.
It's the riveting science and tech show that keeps you up to date with the hottest gizmos on the block and revealing the illustrious and innovative visionaries in Zimbabwe. So much to see, you'll keep swiping.
This cherry red beauty is the Dairy Auto M7 mini electric car.
they've designed our brute force incubator board.
Look at what we've got here.
Solar powered scarecrow was part of the project that I was supposed to complete.
Catch Swipe every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. on ZTN Prime, DSTV channel 294. Get the picture?
This is The Mint live on ZTN Prime. You're sneaking into the world of business, finance, and economics. I'm Ibn Abunda. We're coming to you from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. Now, coming up, Africa's startup scene is showing strong signs of revival in 2025 with new data from Africa. The big deal revealing that startups raised over $1.4 billion in the first half of the year, up 78% from the comparative 2024 period. Large deals are back in force with 39 funding rounds of $10 million or more, the highest since 2022, and exits have surged to 21, nearly matching the totals for all of 2023 and 2024 combined. This signals renewed investor confidence and more activity beyond the big four markets, reaching countries like Togo, Uganda, and Ivory Coast, yet the numbers also highlight a stubborn gap. Less than 1% of H1 2025 funding went to female-led startups. Today we unpack what's behind the funding rebound, what's holding true inclusivity, and what it will take for funders and investors to build on this very momentum. Now the Mint will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Where music transcends boundaries, where rhythm and melody unite the hearts of people, comes a show that celebrates the power of music like never before. Get ready to dive into a sonic journey that will leave you mesmerized and yearning for more. Welcome to the captivating world of Z Vibes. Vibe to it, baby. dental checkups, experiments, games,
The mixture is making bubbles and the bubbles have changed color. Our balloon has been filled by carbon dioxide.
We have it all right here on Happy Sprouts. Catch us exclusively on Citizen Prime, DSTV channel 294.
They call me Racer X, or in this case, Racer J. All right.
Put your seatbelt on.
You're watching, of course, The Mint, your sneak peek into the world of business, finance, and economies. I'm Ibn Mabunda coming to you from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. Now, new data from Africa, the big deal shows Africa's startup ecosystem roaring back to life in 2025, with startups raising more than 1.4 billion US dollars in the first half of the year, a 78% jump from the first half of 2024. Now, to discuss these figures and what they mean, I'm joined by Stephen Moraga, a startup expert and founder of Great Zambezi Initiative. Stephen, hello and welcome to The Mint.
Good afternoon, Ben. Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. Now, to get the ball rolling, before we before we move on to the statistics and really get to interrogate what these figures actually mean, we seem to note that there would be different values that are tabulated by different agencies. This very one is speaking of just about 1.5 billion in the first half of the year. You take a comparison with other statistics produced by other agencies like Brighter Bridges, you'd find that the statistics there would be very well different. Why is that?
I think it all comes down to their sources. The people who have been working on these reports, they have their own sources in terms of where they get the information. And also, one thing that we might need to add is that not all the fundraising transactions are made public. There are some startups that are closing good, funding rounds, but either it's their request or it's at the request of the investor to say don't disclose. So there are a lot of fundraising activities that are more than what is being reported, because of that. So at the end of the day, information, not all information is coming out in terms of who and who have managed to raise funding. So at the end, if another is saying 2.5 billion, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are inaccurate. It just means that they have access maybe to information which the other guy did not get to access. Yeah, so it's understandable.
Right. Now, let's get into the figures. The new figures, of course, show Africa's startups raised over $1.4 billion in the first half of 2025, up 78% from last year. What could have driven this very increase that's being noted here?
I would think it's a combination of issues here. We are seeing, of course, Africa's ecosystem is maturing. The ecosystem itself is maturing, meaning it's always bound to give confidence to the investors. Also, we can't run away from global events, things that will be happening globally that affect, especially the movement of capital. After the COVID-19 pandemic, I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was this euphoria about, everyone wants to fight the virus, and they've been throwing around a lot of money. But after We had also this the restlessness that has been taking place. You could look at the war between Ukraine and Russia. It affected the capital markets somehow. So I would think that there's that combination of the ecosystem itself being appealing and also things changing at the global stage where maybe people are becoming more comfortable with deploying their capital, investors.
Right. Now, while total funding is growing, the gender gap seems to pretty much remain very much on the stuck side, with female-led ventures getting less than 1% of that startup funding in 2025. Why is that?
It's a thorny issue. I think there have been a lot of, lobbying, a lot of effort, in terms of trying to get the girl child to be, to enjoy that level playing field. I can't really point out the cause to say what exactly is the reason, especially from an ecosystem builder perspective. I understand the efforts, the deliberate efforts that are being put in place to encourage the girl child to step up. I would then move to possibly make recommendations in terms of how we can address this. We just need to have more and more capacity building opportunities for the female founders, investment readiness programming that support the female founders so that they can be ready to confidently present their business cases to investors. In my thinking, maybe the more that is done, the more we increase our chances. There's this imbalance that exists, I think, not only in the startup sector, it's all over. We have a lot of work to do in that regard.
Right. Now, the stats are indicating quite a lot of activity where fintechs are concerned, as well as where climate tech institutions are concerned. I've been following these trends for nearly 2 decades, and I can tell you off cuff, any point, whenever there is any indication of a report in Africa, you know that fintechs are leading the trend. Why is that?
At the end of the day, payments, they are like the lifeblood of business. So I think that is why fintech is seem to be leading. It's to do with the payments, the transactions. Everyone wants to transact, and there's still a lot of exclusion in as far as payments is concerned. So I think that's why it's fintech seem to be leading.
Right. There's been some activity where new markets are concerned, like Togo, Uganda, Ivory Coast, somewhat reversing what we have seen. But of course, the big four remain, that being your Kenya, of course, your South Africa, your Egypt, sometimes between Morocco and of course, Rwanda, you'd notice some vacillation and oscillation in terms of who gets to make up the big four, depending. Now, my question is, what are the driving forces where the startups of the big four are concerned that would be important where the rest of Africa is concerned? Or maybe to rephrase that discourse to say, what is it that the big four are doing that the other African countries could perhaps learn from and use to develop their own startup ecosystems?
I would think, in addition to having this vast population, like when you look at South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, and Kenya, they have, sizable populations, and you would also want to look at their policy environment. I would think the big four, if there's anything that is in common, is that they have deliberate policies. It's either they have an act of parliament or they have deliberate policies that really promote investment, that encourage investors to come through. So I would think that's what separates them.
Right. We take a quick breather. When we come back, we look at the Zimbabwean ecosystem and some of the key developments that would be important to see to it that startups in Zimbabwe can access startup funding. Now, the minute to be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Catch exclusive interviews every weekday for candid, exciting, and thought-provoking conversations with your host, Erika Ndoro.
We talk about arts, we can talk about sports, we can even talk about politics, and sometimes we venture into a nice guitaristic play.
The one story where you can't get out of your head. Karo mwana mnimambama mu studio. Wakatarisa munhu so Erika like where you are sitting. Ndozongokona bata face so pasina munhu.
Wakasiya music yako iyo afro chakuti ndo music manje ndiye muZimbabwe.
And I'm sure they're still saying the same thing now.
Yeah, so Shona kana kuti chindevere kana mumwe mutaure muno muZimbabwe ndiwe iwewe. Ndiwo rupawo rwako. Ndicho chidadiso chako.
Catch me, Erika Ndoro, right here on ZTN Prime every single Monday at 7 p.m. whilst we get exclusive.
You're watching The Mint as we come to you from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. I'm Eben Mapunda. We are taking a look at startup trends on the continent and how they relate with the Zimbabwean context. The big question is, how can Zimbabwe leapfrog? How can Zimbabwe develop its own startup ecosystem so that its startups can also attract the much needed funding to leapfrog some of the business concepts that the youngsters in Zimbabwe are developing? And of course, I am with Stephen Muraga, a startup founder as well as a co-founder of a Great Zambezi Initiative. Stephen, picking up from where we left off, the big question is, how does Zimbabwe's startup ecosystem compare to the continental trends we are seeing? And are local founders feeling this same funding revival?
In as far as fundraising is concerned, attracting venture capital, especially from outside, it's several reports I think you can find. There's that acknowledgement that Zimbabwe has got the brains, has got the quality founders. So I would think some of the things that we might be missing in the ecosystem can be addressed by policy.
I know a good number of founders that have appeared here on The Mint who have told me off camera, look, I'm running with this particular concept, but instead of having it established here or incorporated in Zimbabwe, I've had it incorporated in Singapore, or I've had it incorporated in Mauritius. That's what we have been picking here on The Mint. Why is that?
Yeah, it's because I think you agree with me. We have spoken about this battering that Zimbabwe has received. There are a lot of things that have been written and spoken about Zimbabwe, bad things that make investors to feel shy, in terms of coming to Harare and looking for investment opportunities. So the idea of going outside Zimbabwe and incorporating, you're trying to find where the investor perception is favorable, so you set up there, whilst knowing very well that I'm a Zimbabwean and this thing is a Zimbabwean project. You to try and go out there and see if you can fundraise from a different market, from a different jurisdiction. So at the end of the day, is the image. We need to do a lot of work, and you guys, the media, you really need to come to the party. in this regard.
Right. Zimbabwe is finalizing its national ICT startup policy. What practical impact do you expect to come out of that? I know that you are involved as well in that framing. How important is that?
It has been a huge honor for me and my team, collaborating with the Ministry of ICT, Postal and Courier Services in trying to come up with a startup policy, which is at the moment it's in draft stage. We'll be going into stakeholder consultations so that at least you can get feedback from everybody. The question. In terms of what we expect from the policy once it's concluded, we're expecting to see a change in terms of perception by investors. That interest, we expect to see a spike in investors wanting to come in Zimbabwe. I know quite a number of them who want to come to Zimbabwe, and I believe that this piece of this policy is going to be the trigger for those who are sitting on the fence, whether they should get on the plane or not. It's going to, bring in that confidence, and also it's going to give some relief to the startup founders, especially when I look at what we have right now in terms of the draft. I feel, there's this Shona saying, Regai Ziveshiri Mazaya Anamuto, that kind of thing. I feel the startup founders, they are being burdened way too early by especially regulations, and you have to comply here, you have to comply there, of which the policy is also making suggestions about having regulatory sandboxes where founders can come and test their concepts without any burden. You have to comply with this and that. So I think these are some of the highlights of what we should expect.
Right. Where else has a startup policy been developed and implemented that perhaps could work as a template on which Zimbabwe can build its own?
Of course, we have countries like you mentioned earlier on, Rwanda, and also the big four, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya. Those are good places for us to learn. And also outside the country, you need to also to learn about what they're doing in Finland, the US, and also in a few other, Singapore and India. We may really need to also to learn from there. Also another one is Israel. I think there's also some good things happening there.
Right. How important is the role of angel investors and incubators in developing Zimbabwean startups?
If you are to look at it from the education system, you look at the angel investors, the incubators, like the ECD, the early childhood development. These are the guys who take a bet, when it's not even clear whether this project is going to make it. So they are very, very important in the formative years of startups. Because some of the angel investors, they're not just giving you whatever money it is that they're giving you. There's some of them, they go the extra mile in terms of mentoring these upcoming founders. Yeah, same with the incubators. They're actually necessary. One of the things that in my fundraising journey, talking to venture capitalists out there, most of them, they are interested in knowing if a founder has participated in an incubation program or an accelerator before they can put in their money. They're interested in knowing if you have passed through those stages. So I think they are very critical to the growth of the ecosystem.
Right. You mentioned how young startups in Zimbabwe are being subjected to a lot of regulation, and obviously that also speaks to the aspect of taxes. What do you think should or could be done to make it easier for startups to develop in our economy?
One thing for sure, we need to agree on the definition of a startup. I hope you are not going to ask me. We have spoken about it already. One thing that is sure is when we have an agreed definition of a startup, talking about innovation, talking about the scalability aspect, it should be easy then to say if a startup meets this criteria, it should be qualified. One of the things that are being suggested in the draft is a startup registry. So meaning to say a startup should then be recognized, should then be qualified for some of the tax incentives and so forth if they made it to that registry. So that is not just everybody. You know, I start a business today. I want to qualify for whatever, you know, gaps. But you see that there are recommendations of tax holidays that to allow the founders to trade. Of course, then it's either an issue of, is it age? Is it 1 to 3 years old, or is it going to be revenue based? Just, okay, if they start generating revenues like this, I think they should then be able to start paying taxes.
Well, you read my mind there when you spoke about the definition of a startup. If I open a tuck shop in Dzivarasekwa, right by the Jura Wall, does that qualify as a startup?
You need to pass the test here. What innovation is it? What can you say? What are you innovating in around? You can actually have your startup in Dzivarasekwa and be supplying the entire country. Through innovation you come up with. So those are the questions that you need to pass. Is there any innovation to it, or just doing what everyone is doing? How scalable is it? Is it something that you can say I can scale and have thousands, millions of that? So I think those are some of the issues that we need to consider. I wouldn't say a startup just as, I mean, a tuck shop, just like we know tuck shops, you say it's a startup, not in the sense of what we are talking about.
One of the key elements of the report that we looked at is the fact that there were 21 exits, meaning companies where investment actually went in, but somewhere along the lines, the model did not take off as expected. As a result, those 21 companies actually collapsed. Now, the question would be, what would be your top advice for Zimbabwean founders hoping to position themselves to benefit from this continental upswing in funding and deals?
So when you said exit, I thought you were actually saying the guys, they made their money, grow the company valuation and sold it off, not an issue of just going bankrupt and closing shop. What I would like to encourage the Zimbabwean founders is, please take advantage of available platforms where you can grow capacity. Should appreciate a thing called mentorship. It's not all about money most of the times. And I encourage that you should look to raise the little. It's not how much you can raise, but how little you can raise, so that it takes you to the next level. Who would want stories where if someone raises $20 million, then two years down the line they have closed the shop? I don't think it means they got the money when they were not ready for the money. So I would think Zimbabwean founders, let's also think beyond the borders of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, according to investors in startups, they tell you it's a very small market. So you should think of how can you penetrate Malawi.
Right, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Stephen Muraga, Great Zambezi Initiative co-founder, thank you for appearing on The Mint.
As always, thank you.
Fantastic. And of course, that's a wrap on The Mint. Do follow us on our social media handles at Zing Papers TV Network, as well as at ZTN Prime. Your views and your thoughts are important to us. I'm Ibn Mabunda, the money man. Let them do what they do. When we do what we do, we mean business. Thank you for watching and have a good day.